Hello and welcome back to AWS On Air, coming at you live from the DC Summit. I'm Steve Roberts, the developer advocate at AWS for the .NET and PowerShell tech stacks, and I'm joined by my digital twin here.
Yeah, hey, I'm IoT digital twin, eh? I'm A.M. Grabelny, Polish philosopher and solution architect here at AWS. We've got some wonderful guests joining us today.
We do, yes. So we're joined by Rodrigo and Darren. Perhaps let's introduce yourselves and we'll get started.
All right. Thank you for having us here today.
Yeah.
I'm Rodrigo Asensio. I'm Solutions Architect Manager for Public Sector, working on education.
And I'm Darren Alexander, Senior Solutions Architect, also in public sector.
Well, welcome to the show. So we're going to be talking about the culture of DevOps, but I guess we should probably start by figuring out what do we actually mean by DevOps, right? It's a fairly broad term, and I'm sure that a lot of people have different opinions on what it is.
Right.
So can you help us define it?
All right, so let's put a scientific definition to it, and bear with me, I have to memorize
Science.
this part, okay? Yeah.
Science, ooh.
So let's say DevOps is the set of tooling, best practices, and organizational structure that you will, where you want to put together the software development part of your company and the IT operations. And you're aiming to reduce the time to market and through automation, be able to put the software out there with better quality and obviously more security too. That is the scientific definition to it. After that, it can mean many things for different companies, and there are many variations. But it's at the end it's a culture to embrace.
Yeah, I think a lot of people conflate DevOps with just the tooling, right? A lot of people only think about the tooling, and really it's, I like the session name, right? The culture of DevOps, and honestly, it's kind of philosophy too, right? At the end of the day, there's a lot of philosophy behind DevOps and the choices you make when building a DevOps culture, and that, just like any great philosophy, takes on widely different opinions based on who's reading it, right?
But you can, for example, you can implement the tooling, but if you don't have the organizational, you still have your DevOps completely separate from your operation people, you're going to face still the same issues. Probably you will improve some things here and there in how fast you throw over the fence the software for the operations people to deploy. But if you don't embrace the culture, that is going to make the biggest difference.
Right, and with that in mind, I wanted to ask, when we think of people in a DevOps culture, there are a lot of new roles that are emerging, I'd say, or have emerged in the past maybe 5-10 years as a direct result from adopting some of these DevOps practices. What types of roles are we seeing in teams develop outside of the traditional software developer and system administrator?
You're a solutions architect, right?
I am.
What is the favorite answer of solutions architect?
It depends.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, it depends. It depends on your organization. It depends the type of software you're releasing. And let's say a typical web application where you have a front end, you have some back-end processes, and your data store. You will probably have in this team 6 to 8 people, a combination of front-end engineers, back-end engineers, or you can have the full stack engineers working it. You can have people more leaning towards the networking side of things. If security, if you are, for example, in public sector, we have a lot of compliance that is regulating the industry, and we have to have people specialized in security, for example. But it also depends on the use cases.
Yeah. Another common role we see, as organizations transform from, the traditional, say, .com sort of era organization style to a more agile DevOps approach, we'll see, the DevOps evangelist, the individual that, goes around to the various teams, maybe embeds with the teams, and kind of talks about these concepts and sort of helps the uptake of the concepts of this, particular culture. So that's another common role we see.
Okay, so DevOps sounds great, right? But I'm sure for a lot of companies who are considering adopting it, what they're looking at is, what am I going to get out of it? So, what's typical when a company embraces a DevOps culture? What typically are we seeing as the results that come out of that?
All right, depends.
You don't just recommend taking it on faith?
I am surrounded by solutions architects.
Right. But let's look at some data. There's a company called Puppet out there. Probably most of you know it.
Oh, yeah.
They do infrastructure management software, and they publish a report every year. It's called State of DevOps. Right? So it's a long report. And there are a couple of metrics that I don't know. They resonated with me. They're like realistic. I really like to have a fit down to earth and see things from there. So there are a couple of things that happen in these teams that are practicing DevOps. And the first one is, hey, how often can you deploy to a environment? It might be production or any lower environment, test dev, whatever it is. So these teams can deploy daily, right, or weekly. So that is very important. If you have to release a hotfix, right? You can do it in the same day in the same week. So other thing that we are seeing is there is a metric called mean time to recovery. This means how long it's going to take for your application to be back online again. So if your application is down, how long is it going to take you? These teams are taking less than a day to recover that operation. And that is pretty good timing, believe it or not. And these are averages. They are not the best performers or the worst performers either. These are averages. The other thing is when we introduce changes via code or configuration, we're introducing possibilities for failure, right?
Yeah.
And these teams are introducing less than 15% of failures with those changes, which is pretty low for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important when thinking of DevOps, it's very important to consider where we came from, right? And why we've adopted some of these practices. Even at AWS, right? Like there's these practices across the board. I've worked at places I can remember where a release was copied to a physical writable disk.
Yep.
And we only did it maybe like once every 3 months because it was a huge ordeal. We had to stay overnight,
or the
make
weekends.
sure that things didn't fail, right? And be able to roll back really quickly if they couldn't. And by really quickly, that's like maybe tomorrow, right?
At best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting
Could
to
be
think
days.
the results that come from that, right?
I'll tell you a quick anecdote. A small change can have a huge impact.
Yes.
Right? So I used to work with teams overseas, and they were doing writing the software, and we used to deploy it. Right? My team was fully DevOps. The other team was not fully DevOps. They were throwing the releases over the fence. As soon as we released, that thing failed.
Yeah.
Failed, and you have to pick up the phone and say, hey, help me out. And they probably, if it is somebody in the Far East that you're working with, it's very complicated. So the slight change we did, hey, you know what? You now do the releases, your releases. The first 2 releases were a disaster, obviously, right? But you know what? They learned. And the quality improved a lot. We actually increased like 10x on quality for the measurement we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the side effects in terms of results too, is that if you adopt some of these practices, you start living this culture, you get less pages, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's,
No.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to be waking in the middle of the night.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we do talk about building one of these practices into what we do at our companies, what are some of the things to avoid? What are ways that we could actually end up making things potentially worse if we adopt some anti-patterns?
Probably the things that you shouldn't do, these anti-patterns are all related to not understanding or not fully embracing the DevOps culture. And we can name 3 things. What we call the hero anti-pattern. The hero is a person that will do everything. There is a book out there, I don't know if I can name it or not, the Phoenix Project, right?
Oh, yeah.
That has this Greg character
Yes.
that he's a hero. He does everything, and he's your bottleneck, right?
I've
And
worked with a character like that,
Yeah,
actually,
alright.
at a real job, yes. Yeah.
I was that character before.
You were. I was never that character.
It's bad for the person,
Yeah.
right? Because it will end up burn out.
Yep.
And it's bad for the organization because it ended up being a bottleneck. And people sometimes might realize, hey, this person will do it, right? And they don't get the responsibility or they don't get the knowledge to that.
Right.
So that's probably one of them. The other one could be automation, right? you want to automate as much as you can. Obviously, removing the human will reduce drastically error possibilities. But there are some people that might feel hurt for automating their part of the job.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So you are not automating some part because somebody knows how to do it, but it could be automated. The areas you want to automate at the end are the most lengthy parts, where you don't waste time, and the risky parts, like security, for example. This is something that you don't want to just leave it to a manual check.
No.
Right? The other one is, again, not fully embracing the DevOps culture and having a silo in between your small team, the developers just being developers and the operations just being operations. And that is pretty much not adopting DevOps at all, right? That's the very first thing that you should be doing. And one thing, why? Because you want to share that responsibility.
Yeah, I was just going to say, once you've embraced this sort, cultural change within your organization too, there's the tendency for people to sort of coagulate into silos again. You have to
Yeah.
you have to be, continually cognizant of that, tendency within people to, kind of create these sort of silos and really be aware of that and sort of work to combat that.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting point. Sorry, Steve. I know you were going to jump in there.
Actually, no, I was going to say something about the automation thing. I think that
Yeah.
you're right about that thing about we automate as much as we can, but then there is I'm not sure resentment is the right term, but there is the disgruntled employee who's like, well, I used to do that. I
might feel
important
threatened,
thing, right? I feel
actually.
threatened, but it opens up opportunities for them to go and
There
do
you go.
something else. Right?
There you go.
I think it's important for the business to also embrace creating those opportunities too, and not expect the person who's had their task automated to necessarily go and seek those opportunities themselves. The business should be thinking through, like, where are we going to reallocate these resources once they're available?
Or
It
how
should
you-
be a partnership, right?
How you upskill them, right?
Yeah.
So that is so important also, not just to have the IT group doing this, but having the support from upper management, right? That can see the whole organization and can create, working, for example, with us, to create an enablement plan for that transformation.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the hero pattern too, because I actually have not seen the hero pattern. I've seen maybe a variation of it that I'll call the dictator pattern, where
Yeah.
the person that I worked with had full control over everything, and you couldn't get your code merges in because there was a manual review by one person. That person went out on vacation. We weren't shipping anything. So, but it was very much not a hero kind of motivation. It was more of a, I want control over this.
Gatekeeping.
So
Yeah.
this is another thing to kind of break that apart and have more responsibility and control delegated to more people, right? So you have less single points of failure.
Yep.
Yeah, I call that the under the bus pattern. Right? It's like if that person gets caught by a bus or is
Yeah,
away
you're
for
toasted.
whatever reason, you're toast, right? You're not doing anything.
So Graham, how about lottery? Let's go lottery. If you win the lottery.
The lottery problem? Yeah, yeah.
More positive.
All right, so we mentioned Amazon earlier on, so let's switch to talking about Amazon. What lessons have we learned about DevOps?
So quickly, Amazon, the actual marketplace, are probably most of your customers. I hope you're a Prime customer.
Oh, yes.
There you go. It actually started as a big monolith application, right? And we started to feel the pain points of a big application that can be, for example, longer test cycles, right? Any change you do could affect something that was built probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The other one is you have many teams working on this monolith application. The application goes down. Who are you going to call? It's very complicated
Everyone.
to operate. Right? Your legacy inside, how you pay technical debt. You want to change the database driver. You have to go and change all the calls to the database.
Right.
That's a huge change. So that was a pain. And back in 2009, I believe, we switched to a microservice structure. And with that was not enough just to actually split the application, but also we split the teams, right? And each team, and he can talk more about the teams, right? What is the responsibility of this team? This team they were taking care of everything in there.
Yeah, so Amazon reorganized into 2 pizza teams, or a team, the small enough, autonomous enough that 2 pizzas could feed them. Now,
Which they didn't account for me.
or
Yeah.
2
some of
pizzas.
us, yeah.
I could take that.
So, and suffice it to say that it's small enough to where they really operate within one particular customer's or problem space, so that and then establishing contracts with other teams through APIs. So now instead of the entire organization having access to the entire data model, you work through these APIs, and the team that manages that service or feature controls the data on the back end. So everything is managed through contracts, and we try to keep those contracts small and tight, and really keep the problem space contained in order to really be able to deliver rapidly and innovate quickly and fail fast if we need to.
I seem to remember, wasn't there a memo from Jeff Bezos about everything had to go behind an API?
Yeah.
There was no direct linkage between.
Yep, it was a
services.
mandate.
And
Yeah,
it really
mandate.
doesn't matter what API is, whatever
Right.
your technology. If it's probably soap, right?
Lots of choices. So
REST, GraphQL, the latest
Yeah.
of the doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you don't want anyone from the outside your team to touch your data store, because what is going, you change a table, you probably are destroying 5 other applications and then you don't know about, right? And
Right.
you don't want that, so you want to expose this API.
especially when you're working with something like a SQL-based database too,
Basically.
right? Like where the schema
Yeah.
is predetermined and very important
Everything
to the
will fit.
downstream application. Even with a NoSQL database, you're left with a little bit more options of changing the database directly, but still, you shouldn't, right? Tangentially related to this, I was curious too. I think these are really good indicators of when your company is nearing a point where maybe they need some of these DevOps practices and maybe they need to think about microservices, right? Oftentimes, though, I don't know that it's the best advice to start with microservices always. So what are some indicators that you all have seen? I know I've got some of my own. How can you tell when is it time to break the monolith?
You want me to take it?
Don't say it depends.
I'll tell you based on experience. You don't gonna, if you start an application, and also depends what type of application, but when you start an application, you're not gonna start with 20 microservices.
You have to don't know what an
Correct.
actual service
Because
will compose
If
of.
it is a product, the product might fail,
Right.
right? And you wasted tons of time that you could probably been doing something else. If it is an application that, for example, in government, right? These applications are going to have huge load, and these applications are going to last 20 years probably,
Yeah.
right? So it actually depends on the type of application you're doing. You will want to have this application or the functionality or the modules all together by domain, let's say.
Sure.
All the user functionality together, all the shopping cart functionality together.
Yeah.
Why? Why functionality and not technical affinity, for example, all the database calls together? No, because the functionality will drive usage, and usage will be your next split point, which will be scaling, right? Maybe you will do, for example, when I came to the US, I had to apply to my embassy appointment for getting my visa. I used the create appointment service. And after that, because it was like 3-4 months in the future, I had to press F5 all day long to get an appointment before that, and that is the reads to the open slots, right? And there are way more reads than writes.
Right.
And you know what? That's probably my next scaling point. I will separate the reads, put in a cache, and replicate with a queue, etc., etc. So I would say, to sum up, functionality in the very beginning, be ordered with your code in modules, and after that, you start scaling out by usage.
Can I add to real quick? Metrics. Be collecting
Absolutely.
metrics
Absolutely.
all from the moment you launch, so you know which services actually do need to scale and which are hit the hardest and which you should break out from the monolith.
And what are metrics we can implement?
Yes. Yes.
Easy ones. your basic uptime.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
Right?
helpful one. Yes.
Yeah. And probably if you have an API, probably how long it takes in average to satisfy the request of that API, and how many requests are you getting?
Right.
Right. So those three would be basic to start day one.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we
Well,
should also
Steve, we got about a
mention
minute.
canaries too, right?
Oh yeah.
Canaries just
Yeah.
testing that, hey, everything is good, everything's looking all right, and then there's the rollout, the automation. with
Got about a
Canaries
minute.
testing
Do you
that.
want to
Yeah, so
wrap
let's
us
sum up. Yeah. So, great discussion. What would we like people to take away from the session? If they're looking at the idea of adopting a culture of DevOps.
I'll take it. So this session is super cool, not because we're both there,
Yeah.
maybe yes, but it's cool because people will get to ask anything they want, obviously DevOps related. And this will be a conversation, and we'll be telling about our experiences, the experience of Amazon itself, and what we want is, probably these people is not doing DevOps today, right? And we want them to know what is the concrete next step they can take. And if they
Right.
are doing already something, probably, hey, what is the next step I can do to keep
So,
moving forward?
building on it.
Nice.
Yeah, keep building on it. Cool. All right.
Take us out, Steve.
Yeah. So thank you, Rodrigo and Darren, for joining us. It's great to have you on stage.
Yeah, great to be here.
And we will be back shortly.
Yeah.
All right.
Stick around.
See you soon.
Thank you.